your comments on the proposed zoning ordinance that we've been working on for the past, past several months. As far as the procedure, what we're going to do is there was a sign-in sheet for anyone interested in speaking, which Terry has in front of him. If anyone comes in late and does want to speak and they want to sign in at the back, we'll still let people sign in. The purpose is to make sure everybody has an opportunity to talk. We're not, typically we have a 3-minute time limit. We're not going to enforce that tonight. In the interest of trying to get through and make sure everybody has the opportunity to talk, we're going to ask to keep remarks as a guideline somewhere in the area of around 5 minutes. If you have more than that, we would encourage you to submit it in writing. If people go on much more than that, not everyone will have the opportunity to speak. If you want to submit anything in writing, please do so. We've been getting those. And we are going to put all of the written comments that we get are going to be posted on the website. So everyone's going to be able to see not just what comments were made verbally, but what comments have been made in writing. And this process is still moving along. We still, at this point, have the ability to continue making changes based on your suggestions, and we are doing so at this time. The map, if you see, since it hasn't been changed since maybe you last saw it, to include protection areas on many of the waterways. We will show what, I will have Rick just kind of briefly explain what those are, and then we will open this up for comments. So, Rick, do you want to just explain the change to the map?
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Michael. My name is Rick Tricello, and I'm primarily involved with the mapping of the zoning districts. One of the more significant changes since the last meeting was a buffer area around the Chapter 93, the higher quality streams. It is a 625-foot buffer area that centered around the stream is roughly 325 feet on either side of the stream. There have also been some changes in the R1 district in and around the Waterford area, and some minor changes on some industrial land, one area in and around Laughlin Town and the other on the western edge near the quarry. I believe those were all the major mapping changes, Michael, that have occurred, again with the most significant being the buffer area on the higher quality streams.
And with that, I'm going to hand this over to Terry to start the comment process.
Okay, I want to start off by saying that we have to explain the reason why we're here, and that is basically the curative amendment process. There's 5 points to it, and there's a resolution that was passed by the supervisors stating that the ordinance impermissibly combines subdivision and land use regulations with zoning, which is a violation of Pennsylvania law. The ordinance also establishes procedures which are incompatible with the Pennsylvania Municipal Planning Code, which is what we have to follow. The ordinance fails to provide for every reasonable use in the township as required by Pennsylvania law. And the ordinance as written does not provide for sufficient permitted use as required under Pennsylvania law. Also, the Ligonier Township zoning map as currently constituted does not provide for sufficient natural resource protection. In other words, prior to this, every zoning district permitted unconventional drilling, which has been the topic most people have talked about. So in the process, we would typically follow the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan in Ligonier Township, the most revised edition, is 1990, so it's 25 years old. Most communities update their comp plan every 5 to 10 years, and this is well dated. There's a lot of uses that were not available at the time, and the township comp plan needs to be amended. That's a 2-year process. We're going to start that process as soon as we can finish with zoning. With that being said, I'm going to open it up to the floor. the microphone energized up there. And the first person, which I'll call by name, Mr. David Cromwell, will be number 1.
Can you hear me? Okay. Just a couple things here. I mean, you guys are going to heard it. The Planning Commission hasn't heard it all yet, and I'm sure some of you haven't heard me yet, as of yet. My name is David Cromwell. I'm a resident of Ligonier Township, 892 Nature Run, Ligonier. And I stand here as a very concerned citizen. Again, I should not have to be standing here before you today because of my concern. I am. Most people here are very concerned with ideas and thoughts of both the Planning Commission and the supervisors. My reason for standing here, the taxpayer has foot the bill for zoning litigation in the past at the cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past 20-some years with no accountability to anyone. The master plan over the past 20 years was an illegal ordinance that could not stand up to litigation. To make matters worse, it was never recorded at the courthouse. This in itself raises accountability issues. How and why this could happen, I have no idea. Is it by design? You answer. For 20 plus years, the master plan was a no-growth, anti-business ordinance, no allocation for light industry, all conditional use, conditional on one thing: how much money do you have to fight it? Tax base issues. Declining tax base does not address growth. Amusement tax, not fairly assessed. U.S. Conservancy issues need looked at. Any local benefit to the local tax, or is it just federal? That's a U.S. Conservancy thing, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. The old ordinance had no time for light industry or high-tech employment. Why, I have no idea. Now all of a sudden, and this is a red flag to me, we have 180 days or else for the new ordinance. In 2009 through 2014, there was land removed from the U.S. Conservancy easements. Example, I hold right here a 16-page U.S. federal document. I don't even remember what it's called, but 16 pages. And the example I have here, somebody, and I'm not going to mention any names, made a $300,000 investment to what's going to happen with drilling already. That's in 2000, and this is not the only one. 2009 through 2014, several of these have taken place in Ligonier Township. In 2013, we put in a 19-mile-long, $20 million, 16-inch water line in the name of drought. I believe it's in the name of drilling. In December 9, 2014, the zoning ordinance was deemed garbage and illegal. Today, a new ordinance is being written to allow heavy industry in areas seen fit. What amazes me is that the township now is good enough for industry. Not only light industry, but also heavy industry. And to me, that has a sign of money behind it. But in reality, it has no benefit whatsoever to the Ligonier Township. If you can tell me that, I would appreciate it. On to Act 13, the impact fee. $50,000 a year per well. I personally don't think that's nowhere near enough to cover the cost of the drilling. My worst fear before the first drill in the ground, and I'm used in litigation over fracking, the taxpayer is going to foot the bill once again. Absolutely unjustifiable that the taxpayer should bear the burden of the fallout of such activity that only benefits so few people in the valley. I urge you to develop a legislation fund funded only by recipients of royalty payouts. A lesson can be learned from history Look at the damage and reclamation cost of mine drainage. We can't afford it. In closing, there are very knowledgeable and well-versed people here to speak tonight. I urge you to listen to their concerns with an open mind and make decisions based on facts and not based on the root of all evil, and that is money. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Raina Ripple.
So I'm actually here tonight from Washington County, and I was asked to come by some residents in the community. And I have a very particular expertise to share tonight, pretty unique actually in the country. I'm the director of the Southwest Pennsylvania Environmental Health Project, which again is pretty much completely unique in the country in that we're looking at the health impacts of natural gas drilling. We presented some comments on behalf of our toxicologist at the January meeting. I'm going to actually repeat some of those comments because I think it's very important to have those on the record. But I also added some things which are unique from my perspective as the director of this project in what we're seeing in Washington County. And I think this is a very important perspective to bring you to tonight because, as everyone here I'm sure knows, Washington County is very heavily drilled at this point. So, again, my name is Raina Ripple. I'm the director of the Southwest Pennsylvania Environmental Health Project. We're in McMurray, Pennsylvania, in Washington County. On January 13th, 2015, and we usually just go by the acronym EHP, so I'll refer to us as EHP, submitted comments to the Ligonier Township supervisors regarding the potential effects unconventional natural gas development could have on the health of residents who live or work within close proximity to this industry. We've been around since 2011, and since that time, EHP, and this is what really makes us unique in the country, we have actually documented numerous health symptoms and related air and water pollution for residents throughout southwestern Pennsylvania and in other states. We've provided health assessments, done concurrent monitoring of both air and water, and this is for residents in West Virginia, Ohio, and now in New York. Our findings to date closely mirror that of similar research. Again, note, this is research. This is not just a survey, this is really research starting to come out, or work done in California, Colorado, North Dakota, Texas, and Wyoming, amongst other places. So previously in the testimony we submitted in January, EHP cited 3 peer-reviewed articles that address this problem, along with other reports from residents about health effects associated with unconventional natural gas development. This is in Washington County, Pennsylvania, that some of this research is coming out. Similar to this, the Garfield County, Colorado study. These are definitive health impacts which have begun to emerge, and these are plausibly associated with nearby gas drilling activities. The findings from these and other studies need to be considered seriously. Some of this is a repeat of the testimony, so I'm not going to go into details, but I do want to emphasize these studies, again, these are peer-reviewed studies that are coming out. This is the highest level of scientific evaluation available. This is the research that we look at. This is the level at which EHP functions. And secondly, the actions reported tend to be especially hazardous for individuals with health concerns that make them susceptible to air toxics, such as children with asthmatic conditions. Most important is the fact that, I really want to emphasize this, there has been no systematic evaluation of health conditions found near unconventional natural gas development sites by the state or federal agencies that would normally be expected to evaluate them. It is not the case that there is evidence of safety, but that there is little evidence being collected and evaluated to prove absence of harm. The agencies responsible for permitting such sites need to be especially careful to consider the steps necessary to protect residents in the face of such uncertainty. And reports of health effects, some of which are reported in leading scientific and medical journals. From both a personal and professional perspective, I would like to testify tonight that I have watched the transformation of Washington County firsthand. I have talked to numerous residents in other heavily impacted unconventional natural gas drilling areas in our region. Others can testify more clearly on the zoning aspects of this issue, but from the health assessment data EHP has documented, it is increasingly clear to me that this type of industrial activity is an incompatible use of residential or agricultural properties, particularly when sited in close proximity to residences, schools, or other areas of vulnerable populations. We have observed and documented an additional concern of accidents, somewhat inevitable, and luckily not resulting yet in any known fatalities in Washington County, but documented as interrupting water supplies elsewhere in Pennsylvania, linked to numerous spills, and linked to at least 2 fatalities in Greene County. While I understand the complexity of the decision at hand, EHP strongly recommends a precautionary approach to allowing this type of industrial activity within areas that were never meant to allow heavy industry. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dr. Joe Evans. The speaker after Mr. Evans is Ms. Andy Pollock. Is Mr. Evans here? Oh.
I'm Joe Evans, a resident of Murraysville, and I appreciate you allowing me to speak tonight. In 2010, I did a study of the potential risks of Marcellus well drilling and estimated the probability of a serious incident using DEP data. I came to the study, which I'll leave with you tonight, came to the conclusion that the probability of a serious incident being associated with any particular well was almost 100%. Now, I could come to you tonight and tell you that I'm concerned about the pollution, air pollution, and water pollution of the Marcellus well drilling operations. But if I do that as a citizen, I will be characterized as someone who is simply against industry, disturbed, or not a good American. So I wanted to share with you how the industry feels about the risks. Now, you're all familiar with the television commercials that you hear. When I hear the music, dum, 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 I can see, and you can probably see, the bucolic landscape of a well site that has been returned to its original site or condition. And the industry typically indicates that drilling is safe and will not affect our water or air in any significant manner. However, when the industry goes to ask you to invest in their operations, public companies like Range Resources must file, along with their 510K filings, SEC filings, a statement of the risk involved in our operations. Let me read this to you. This is from the prospectus of Range Resources. Oil and natural gas operations are subject to many risks, including well blowouts, craterings, explosions, uncontrollable flows of oil, natural gas or well fluids, fires, formations with abnormal pressures, pipeline ruptures or spills, pollution releases of toxic natural gas, and other environmental hazards and risks. At least 7 serious fires and explosions have occurred since 2009. There was one in Derry just 2 days ago. Brooke County, you know the list. In many of these incidents, residents were evacuated for an area 1.5 mile around the well site. These operations have no business being put 500 feet from your children's schools, your churches, your community gathering places. Just think of it. You can also see the image in the dark of night where the fire is burning on the horizon, and think that that fire and that explosion and that evacuation could be at your child's school or your extended care home or any of the facilities, including your own home in this community. So I seriously ask you to consider having adequate setbacks in your ordinance regulating the zoning of these operations. And I will leave with you my own report, a report by Dr. Ingrafia regarding the leakage of wells, and a recent report using advanced technology to identify the source of methane contamination and infiltration in groundwater. Thank you for letting me speak.
My name is Andy Polak. I reside presently around the Irwin area. I'm going to read something. My wife and I'm a civil structural mechanical designer / cost estimator with design experience in air and water pollution along with heavy industry. My wife and I moved to Maymont area of Washington Township, Westmoreland County in 1973. Around 2004 or 2005, an independent driller put a shallow well approximately 1/4 mile north of us. Shortly afterwards, several families living near there lost their water wells. In 2007 or 2008, XTO, a division of Exxon, drilled a shallow well and fracked it about 1/4 mile south of us. At the same time, Consul Energy was drilling approximately 40 Marcellus wells 1 to 3 miles east of us. Prior to these wells, our in-house Omni water filter required changing every 3 to 4 months. In 2008, we began getting sand in our well and we had to replace the pump and change water filters every 5 to 7 days. Our water began to spout, especially out of the hot faucet. When you turned it on, it would go. Let's see. So we called the DEP. They did not come to our home, but instead suggested that we vent our well because our house could explode. We vented the well and stopped drinking the water. We continued to wash clothes, bathe, and flush toilets using the well water. I developed rashes, a dry cough, and I can get into that with you. This used to cost me about $40 to $50 a month. I don't need it anymore since I moved to Irwin. We had headaches, sinus problems, elevated blood pressure, dizziness. Additional issues were experienced when drilling occurred was from the nighttime lights, the flaring, the noise. Sleeping at night was disrupted by the constant noise and lights. I found myself falling asleep at the wheel trying to drive into work. Thank God for the rumble strips that woke me. The dust from the trucks became an issue when we could wipe the kitchen counter in the morning and eat breakfast, and then at lunchtime we'd have to wipe the counter again. We moved 2.5 years ago, and since then my health has improved. I can compare where we lived before as hell and where we live now as heaven. When we sold our home in Maymont, the radon test was conducted and the reading was 20, compared to our current home, which was tested for radon and scored a 3. Seismic testing was conducted in Maymont, which shook our home at least 2 times while I was home, and the cracks and doors, I had to plane or cut down 2 doors that wouldn't open and close anymore from the shaking of the house. My back porch sunk about 3.5 inches. My front porch sank about 1.5 inches. There were no mines under our house in Maymont. Where we live in Irwin, there are mines all under Irwin, and I'm very concerned about this issue of having mines under your home and someone's permitted to shake your home for seismic testing. Just isn't right. I found out they don't have the proper liability coverage to do this. They're doing it disregarding. Fracking creates many issues, which include deep well injections are being linked to recent earthquakes, liners that fail in frac ponds, and air pollution created from their evaporation, radioactive drill cuttings being dumped in landfills, compressor stations, noise and pollution. Flowback water has been transported to water treatment facilities that are not equipped to properly treat flowback waste. Regarding transmission pipelines, for example, the 12-inch Sunoco line from Houston to Delmont will transmit 70,000 barrels a day, and they're proposing another 30-inch transmission line. This is for propane and ethane. The 30-inch line will carry 275,000 barrels a day. If this line were to have a catastrophic failure, in 1 minute, it could release 190 barrels a minute. The concerns about propane and ethane are they're much more volatile than gaseous gas. It's heavier than the surrounding atmosphere, and when it escapes, it displaces air or oxygen, and the people come in contact with this gray cloud that formed would smother, and worse yet, if it finds an ignition source, the explosion would be horrific. In this line, they're proposing and getting away with it. It's 45 miles long. They're hoping to put 4 manual shutoff valves in this, which you cannot do. To design this properly, you need automatic shutoff valves and spark arresters. Now, the one thing that I wanted to tell you tonight, an explosion and fire in Greene County, the firemen were not able to get within 2,000 feet of this well. This happened about last year. 1 worker was killed. This risk of serious accidents add to the concerns placing these wells within 500 feet of our homes, our schools. If a fireman with a fire protective coat on cannot get within 2,000 feet of a well fire, how on God's earth can you put this next to a schoolyard?
Mr. Pollard, can you finish up?
Okay. Recent government statistics indicate that gas needs to be $6 a 1,000 cubic foot for drillers to break even. Today's price is around $3.25 to $3.50. Oil needs to be at about $75 or $80 a barrel. and currently it's $45 an hour. Ask yourself why. They want to get this infrastructure in place so that they can ship the 3/4 of this overseas to China, India, and Scandinavia, and we're going to be left here with the bag because they don't even want to tax it. They're ruining our roads, and China and India is going to benefit from this.
Thank you, Mr. Pollard.
Thank you for letting me
We need to
speak
move
this
on.
evening.
Thank
Okay.
you. In the interest of,
Comment.
you're on here to speak,
We
Ms.
were
Milburn.
guaranteed that our leaders, do you want to do it?
No.
Okay. We were guaranteed we could have time for our speakers. They traveled 2 hours to get here. Now you're changing the time limit that Mr. Carcella guaranteed us.
In order to make sure that all the Ligonier Township residents get the opportunity to speak, I'm going to skip ahead to the Ligonier Township residents. We'll let the non-residents go at the end. So I'm going to go to the next one on the list is
Oh, my
Dennis
God.
Robitaille. Thank you.
Unbelievable. Again, this township is unbelievable.
My name is Dennis Robitaille. I live in Ligonier Township. As has been made abundantly clear over the past 2 months, the rezoning proposal before the township includes one major change for its citizens, the prospect of intensified gas exploration by hydraulic fracturing. Of the many effects associated with this process, which many other speakers have already commented on, I will limit my comments to its potential effects on property values. For many people, the single greatest investment they make in their lifetime. I had quite a number of examples which I've gathered from all over the country. I will simply sort of give you a synopsis of those very quickly. They included examples of people losing property value anywhere from 20 to almost 100%. It also includes examples of mortgage companies which no longer want to grant mortgages to anyone who has a well on the property, or even to those who are the neighbors of people who have wells. And it also includes insurance companies that now refuse to underwrite homes with wells or even close to wells. I'll read you only one example, I think the most infuriating of all. Is from the Wall Street Journal. I quote, Exxon CEO and board chairman Rex Tillerson sued to stop construction of a water tower that would supply nearby drilling operations because of the nuisance of, among other things, heavy truck traffic, noise, and traffic hazards from the fracking operations the tower would support. That's right. The head of the single largest drilling company in the world acknowledges the, quote, constant and unbearable nuisance that would come from having lights on at all hours of the night, traffic at unreasonable hours, noise from mechanical and electrical equipment. Tellingly, Tellerson's lawsuit, filed in Texas in 2012 with other plaintiffs, including former House Majority Leader Dick Armey, claims the project would do, quote, irreparable harm to his property values. Granted, my home or yours might not be very close to a drill site, but home buyers don't necessarily rely on precise distance measurements and statistics before buying. They tend to consider what their senses tell them and what the future might hold for the property they are about to buy. If your property has an attractive view, as many properties in the Ligonier Valley do, they will wonder what might appear one day on that rural landscape. They will wonder if they will have to go through noisy, heavy truck traffic on the trip home rather than a relatively quiet ride in the country. If the property is in the agricultural area of the township's new zoning map, or in the residential area but near the agricultural zone demarcation line, prospective buyers will wonder if a nearby property will become a gas well site. Won't they have the same concern as the Exxon CEO did about future property values?
with all the noise, bright lights, constant truck traffic, air quality, etc. If you already have property in Ligonier Township, you will wonder the same things, but from a different perspective. What if in the years ahead you wanted or had to sell your home? How big of a hit might you have to take if buyers are reluctant to buy, banks reluctant to lend, or insurers reluctant to underwrite? You might not ever know, but it might be like someone hacking your online bank account or retirement fund. You may find it has $5, $10, $25, $50, $100,000 less than you thought. Everyone knows property is a big part of a nest egg, or the equity needed to buy elsewhere should you have to move. Who will compensate you for the loss? Will you have to sue and endure the anxiety and frustrations of a long court fight? Or will you have to absorb the loss? Ordinary people being left holding the bag, absorbing the loss, is the principal theme of the advent of hydraulic fracturing. It started with the most wide-ranging effort at leaving others to absorb all or part of the losses, the Halliburton loophole. The loophole is contained in the Energy Policy Act of 2005, which exempts gas drilling and extraction from requirements in the Underground Injection Control Program of the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Clean Air Act, and the Clean Water Act. If the gas extraction process is as safe as the industry proclaims, why exempt the industry from lawsuits resulting from accidents and environmental degradation? If it's safe, why seek to avoid legal responsibility beforehand? This is the most egregious example of passing the buck. And forgive me for being suspicious. I see much the same MO, willful or not, in the rezoning process now before us in Ligonier. Again, I'm summarizing here. I want to move ahead. Of all the conditions mentioned in the new zoning plan, we have things that seem to be protecting the interests of citizens of Ligonier. There are restrictions for drilling operators on decibel levels, air modeling, spills, traffic patterns. Do these actually protect the residents of the valley, or they just as much force them to tolerate a new level of environmental degradation, not previously part of their daily lives? Mr. Carcella has on numerous occasions insisted that the new zoning ordinance offers more protection than the previous one. Many people don't buy that assertion. Once the gas rigs go up, the pipelines and compressor stations put in place, life in any area is never the same. Those who came to live here for its quality of life and beauty will feel betrayed. Those who may want to live here in the future will hesitate and may well decline to invest for all the reasons I and others have stated. The potential decrease in buyers alone will depress the asking price. For current property owners, fracking will come like a thief in the night. Thank you very much.
Rosalind Rogatine, please.
Before I start my statement, I just wanted to mention that originally we were told that speakers would be given ample time to make their concerns known. I want people to know that 3 speakers, all of whom come from outside our area, have come to speak about their experiences, their knowledge, and they have been skipped over. So I certainly hope that, I think it would be
It's not funny.
very nice if you would please reinstate the speakers in the order that they were listed on that the list of speakers. Thank you. One of the greatest concerns for Ligonier Township will be the quality of drinking water coming into their homes. Every home uses water, as you know, every day for drinking, food preparation, bathing, cleaning, etc. We cannot do without it. Every everyone would agree it must be protected for all families in our township, no matter where they live, no matter where or how their water originates. There are protections in the new proposed ordinance and zoning map of 2015. For example, protection areas have been set aside for public water supplies in our township, specifically the northwest areas around Latrobe Reservoir to protect water for the residents of Latrobe, and the well-protected areas in the northeast sections of the township, for protection for township and residents of 2 boroughs who receive public water. However, there is no provision for the protection of groundwater, from which approximately 52% of Ligonier Township residents obtain their water. That is, from their private water wells. There are at least 1,600 homes with private water wells. This is more than the approximately 1,440 homes which receive their public water supply from 2 local municipal authorities. Now that water supplies are protected for them, it would seem fair to protect all water sources. Many private wells are located in the agricultural zoning district, which encompasses approximately 70 to 75% of the township's area on the zoning map. These agricultural zones will permit unconventional gas drilling as a conditional use, putting water wells throughout at risk for contamination. Many more wells are located in relatively small residential districts, almost all of them surrounded by the vast agricultural zones where the gas drilling may occur. Homes in residential zones may be in close proximity to gas wells, leaving open the possibility of their well water being contaminated. How many instances of private water contamination have been documented? The Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection has a list of complaints where private water wells were adversely impacted by oil and gas activities. A recent report dated last month lists 251 complaints. The majority, all except one, starting in 2008 to 2014, pretty much the time when unconventional gas drilling started in the state of Pennsylvania. What does it take to protect oneself? It will be costly. The gas company will test at its expense a home's water well prior to drilling, only if the home is within 1,000 feet of a proposed well. Documentation of the company's testing may not be forthcoming to the owner if the owner does not specifically request the results before testing. 1,000 feet is very minimal. Incidents of contamination due to drilling have been documented thousands of feet away from a well. For our own protection, authorities advise us to pay for our own testing. That costs over $300 for a minimum baseline data set, and as much as $1,700 for testing of some elements that may be found in gas drilling. The water testing companies cannot even test for all gas drilling contaminants due to the proprietary secrecy of the gas industry. Secrecy was made possible due to the proprietary secrecy, was made possible due to the exemptions to federal law regarding clean air and clean water granted only for unconventional gas drilling in 2005. One has to wonder why this industry needed exemption from federal laws that protect our environment and the health and welfare of the people. Some owners who live on or near drilling sites test every year to assure there have not been any changes. Of course, changes can occur at any time, and the cost of preliminary and subsequent annual testing may be prohibitive for many residents. Even if one feels confident with the test results, how can one know if there are elements present which testing cannot detect, or if an illness will develop 10 to 30 years in the future due to small amounts of contaminant in their well water? According to the PA state constitution, all residents are entitled to clean water. The clear resolution to these serious concerns is to locate unconventional gas drilling in isolated, sparsely populated areas and label them what they are: industrial zones with conditional use for heavy and industrial industry. Please do not let the Ligonier Valley become a test case for how much danger unconventional gas drilling creates in a relatively populated area. Thank you.
Jack Milburn.
Good evening, gentlemen. The oil and gas portion of the proposed zoning ordinance was removed from the township's website. And as of this date, that portion, to my knowledge, has not been revised and is not now posted for public review and comment. Therefore, my comments on that 23-page portion of the ordinance are based on the version previously posted. I have specific comments that I will briefly summarize in the interest of time. My full comments are in this letter addressed to Chairman Thomas on behalf of the Board of Supervisors. 1, setbacks. They are all grossly inadequate. I recommend the following setbacks for well pads and all other gas facilities. Property lines of the gas site 1,000 feet. Property lines on adjoining properties 2,500 feet. Structures on all adjoining properties 3,500 feet. Streams, creeks, and all water sources 1,000 feet. Schools 1 mile. Nursing facilities 1 mile. 2, this use should be a conditional use approved by the supervisors in the industrial zoning district only. Now, I think you may have changed this from a special exception to a conditional use based on the recommendation of the Planning Commission. Noise. All the noise provisions in the prior draft should remain. 4, closed-loop systems should be mandated for all drilling and well completion activities. 5, non-producing abandoned gas wells used for the storage of wastewater should not be permitted in the township. 6, the development site should consist of not less than 100 contiguous acres. 7, the drilling applicant should provide to the municipality the sum of $100,000 to deposit in an escrow account from which the municipality may draw or be reimbursed from for costs, fees, and compliance. Believe me, you will need it. 8, the applicant should provide a comprehensive traffic impact study. Waste. Drill cuttings, fracturing fluids, oil, toxic materials, hazardous materials, and all other waste products shall not be disposed of in the municipality. Junk, refuse, waste, trash, or abandoned materials should not be disposed of on site. Fractured fluid storage ponds, open pits, and reserve pits should be prohibited. Disposal wells should be prohibited in the municipality. 10, an acoustic study should be prepared by and submitted with the application. 11, the applicant should provide an environmental impact analysis study. 12, a community impact study should also be prepared with the application. 13, the applicant should provide a comprehensive air quality study. 14, a hydrogeologic study should be prepared and submitted with the application as well. 15, multiple well pad sites on any one oil and gas development site should be prohibited. 16, all compressors and other power-driven equipment should be powered by electric motors. Such equipment shall not use diesel, oil, or gasoline. 17, all condensate tanks, pressure stations, and so on should be equipped with vapor recovery and or vapor destruction units. You did have that in your prior draft, and it should stay. 18, operators shall arrange for and bear the cost of continuous air monitoring during the life of the project. 19, geophysical exploration or seismic testing must require a separate application to the municipality and must be covered by a separate ordinance. 20, private property owners in the municipality should be able to drill private, conventional oil or gas wells for his or her own personal use in the agricultural zoning district, provided that the oil and gas well may not be used for commercial development or sale to others. 21, the drilling operator should be required to test all water supplies within 1 mile of the well site. 22, drilling operators should be made aware that it is strongly recommended that all oil and gas operations utilize best practices, including green well completion, avoid flaring at all times, do not utilize bleed valves. One final point on the remaining portion of the ordinance. In the definition of agriculture, you end the definition with excluding tourist or recreational activities, banquet facilities, or bread and breakfast. I don't mean to minimize the concerns of nearby residents, but you exclude these activities but want to allow fracking and compressor stations on township farms. Really? Your draft zoning ordinance and draft map contain provisions for the exclusion of unconventional gas drilling via a natural resource protection overlay. It states in part that the intent of the Natural Resource Protection Overlay District is to designate areas where fracking will not be permitted. And the reason for that is because you were concerned about the detriment to health, welfare, and well-being of township residents, or negatively impacting the township watersheds or other vital resources, or impact the historic nature of the community. This is a great use of an overlay, as overlays are intended to enhance the underlying zoning district. By so doing, the overlay will help to protect the residents and farms, the reservoirs, the tributaries in that portion of the agriculture district. In these overlay areas, you've correctly recognized not only the importance of such protection, but also the very real potential for harm caused by hydraulic fracturing. However, practically all of the rest of the proposed agriculture district, and of course all the residential districts, have residents, children, farms, high quality and exceptional value streams, creeks, and tributaries. Don't they deserve the same protection? Of course they do. In the purpose of the oil and gas section, you state you intend to, quote, balance individual property rights regarding mineral resources. That simply can't be done. Gentlemen, we are all at times faced with tough decisions in life. Sometimes the decisions seem tough because there's a perception that there are competing objectives. Your job, your duty as our elected officials, is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Ligonier Township, all of the citizens, and to comply with the law, including the Pennsylvania and United States Constitution. Nothing competes with that. We all have to demonstrate our morality, our integrity, and our wisdom as we make decisions. You must make these decisions and do the right thing. One final comment. These so-called citizens that don't come from here, they came because they wanted to share with you at our request what we thought would be important information for you to hear. These are real people that have real stories. Let them speak. You're going to learn something. Thanks.
Jan over.
Residents of the township asked multiple times for the ground rules of this meeting. We were told, yes, we could have outside speakers. We were told there was no time limit on their presentations. Tonight, without notice, you changed the order of the speakers and you implemented a time limit. When some speakers traveled 2 hours to provide you with important information in which they have expertise. Mr. Carcella and Mr. Korn, everything you do undermines the democratic process. And supervisors and planners, why are you not speaking out? We are your voters. Where are you? You elected Mr. Carcella and Mr. Korn in this township. This is outrageous. Now for my presentation. The report of the ad hoc committee was first shared with township administrators prior to the creation of the newly proposed ordinance and maps. The following arguments are made for preserving the zoned areas that we purchased our property in. Number one, Ligonier Township's comprehensive plan specifies community development objectives as possible, and I will scan those objectives. It's to provide a pleasant, attractive, healthy, safe, and convenient environment for living, working, education, shopping, and recreation. This objective of land use plans includes preserve and improve the natural environment, maintain a rural atmosphere, encourage and promote tourism, preserve the natural topography, and require the compatibility of new development with existing development. I will repeat that. Require the compatibility of new development with existing development. The comprehensive plan directs the development and the protection of this valley as a recreation, tourist, residential, and conservation area, not a heavy industrial use area. The Supreme Court in Robinson identifies hydraulic fracturing and the accompanying seismic testing, explosions, excessive light, noise, dust, water contamination, air pollution, and excessively loud industrial trucks at all hours of day and night as clearly and obviously a heavy industrial property use that will have long-term negative impacts. This use belongs in industrial zones only. Number two, residents have made investments in their property based on the expectation that their zoning districts would be protected and that they would be developed in accordance with the comprehensive plan, which only allows compatible uses. Residents of this valley have made significant financial and quality of life decisions based on the zoning designations of this community. Those were based on R, RA, and conservation designations in which they have resided for years, in many cases for decades. The Supreme Court said this following in regard to siting gas operations near our residences, quote, citizens buying homes and raising families in residentially zoned areas had a reasonable expectation concerning the environments in which they're living. The U.S. Supreme Court warned, quote, those expectations should not be lightly disrupted. The courts have further defined what those expectations include, stating, quote, municipalities have a constitutional duty to preserve the character of neighborhoods and secure zones where family values, youth values, and blessings of quiet seclusion and clean air make a sanctuary for people. Zoning provisions create protection and, quote, should give consideration to the character of the municipality, the needs of the citizens, and the special nature of parts of the municipality. To change neighborhoods to allow for the heavy industrial use of just one industry results in problematic issues, as in this legal letter. Residents are concerned that if industrial use is permitted in residential and agricultural areas, it would negatively impact citizens' quality of life by destroying their enjoyment of their property and homes in the manner they have historically enjoyed. Residents fear the danger of toxic contamination, fires, and the likelihood that their property value will be drastically reduced by being located in a de facto industrial zone, wiping out their equity assets and their retirement funds. They are also reasonably concerned that they'll be unable to secure adequate insurance on their homes, unable to obtain bank financing on their homes as a result of the industrialization. According to the Commonwealth Court, zoning amendments must first be in accord with the comprehensive plan, secondly, provide for compatible uses to protect residents who made investment decisions. If this were not true, the court said, tipple washing plants, steel mills, industrial chicken farms, and firework plants would be permitted in non-industrial areas. It would allow the proverbial pig in the parlor instead of the barnyard. Years and years of case law make it clear that you must use your own property so not as to injure your neighbors. Courts will impose damages for the use of property if it causes an injustice to a neighbor. Fracking clearly has the potential to injure owners of the property near the site. Allowing an industrial process in previously zoned R, RA, or conservation areas violate the comprehensive plan and due process because this rezoning would not protect the interests of neighboring property owners from harm. It would alter the character of neighborhoods and would make irrational classifications. Irrational because they would require allowing drill operations, impoundment, compressors, fumes, explosives in districts that were classified as residential, agricultural, and conservation when residents invested in their property. They're irrational because while bed and breakfasts, for example, continue to be added and subtracted from proposed agricultural areas, and residents, businesses, car washes, or professional offices are not permitted in the ag areas because they're considered incompatible, but yet the heavily industrial process of fracking is allowed. These are strikingly irrational classifications. What you are doing with the proposed map is not in accord with a comprehensive plan, does not provide for compatible use, and it makes irrational classifications. 3, the purpose of zoning. From the Robinson Township versus Commonwealth Court case, quote, permitting fracking, a heavy industrial use that will have long-term negative impacts in residential and agriculturally zoned districts does not serve the purpose of local zoning ordinances. That power only exists under the United States and the Pennsylvania Constitutions only to protect the health, safety, and welfare of township residences. You were not empowered with zoning police power to increase revenue or further develop industry. End of quote. Permitting one particular heavy industrial use to the exclusion of others does not serve the police power of local zoning. Changing most of the valley to industrial use for fracking does not serve the required purpose of zoning. And last, and number 4, you as supervisors must serve as trustees of the environment for future generations. The PA Supreme Court upheld that all government, state or local, have the responsibility and the constitutional obligation under the Pennsylvania Constitution, quote, to act as trustees for the environment of future generations of citizens. Township supervisors cannot delegate this to the DEP. You must act to protect the environment. That trustee principle was just recently reaffirmed in the Court of Common Pleas, with the court stating that, quote, Robinson Township case recognized that local governments have a constitutional obligation to protect the environment, the quality of life of their citizens, and this decision affirms that principle. Judge Lebecchio, 2014. Finally, Ligonier Valley is a tourist area with valued mountain landscapes and skylines and a peaceful environment. The proposed zoning map now makes most of the valley an industrial use for one industry, fracking. Those areas will forever remain industrial. Those of you who sought election to the Board of Supervisors and appointment to the Planning and Zoning Boards are committed to serve for the public good, not personal gain. Some of you have made it clear you sought office primarily to frack your property for personal gain. You have changed our zoning maps for an entire community for the sole purpose of financial gain, without regard to the goals of our community or the laws that define good zoning. Some of you are abusing your trusteeship, our rights, and the basis of our democracy when you try to influence local government for self-serving purposes. For all of the foregoing reasons, you are opening yourself up to the risk of liability for those residents who value the comprehensive plan, the municipal planning code, the Constitution of the State of Pennsylvania, and the Constitution of the United States, as well as our way of life.
Mr. Nordstrom, Ron Nordstrom.
Good evening. Before my prepared remarks, a couple of things that were said tonight bring a few things to mind. One, the last time the supervisors met, I made a request about perhaps creating a conservation zone of sorts around Valley School of Ligonier and Lynn Run State Park and those properties of Ligonier Township, which borders Lynn Run and the adjoining properties. Secondly, in reading over the second draft of the ordinance that you have online, it appeared to me that I had trouble finding the term conditional use, which we kind of thought that fracking would be placed under. But instead, there were a lot of language about special exceptions. And sort of the way I read it, it was almost as if now hydraulic fracking, unconventional drilling, would be a special exception. And so I went to section 14-1, which has the rules that cover special exceptions, and every single point there had to do with flammable and explosive materials and the fire company's ability to respond to them. No mention of poisons, carcinogens, mutagens, endocrine disruptors, and all those other kind of things that are contained in the hydraulic fracking process, those chemicals which go into the ground. In addition, I wanted to share just a personal experience. In order to see what flaring was like, and that's when they initially drill a well, if some of you don't know, and some of the gases that come up initially are not productive, they contain contaminants and so forth, and so they erect a giant pipe taller than the ceiling, and they burn off those gases anywhere from a day to a week. Well, to see one, my wife and I went over to Ligonier Township, and we were parked approximately a half a mile upwind of this thing. And it was winter time, and we could hear, it sounded like a jet engine roaring. It was incredibly loud. And we rolled the window down just a little bit, just so we could hear it a little bit better. And in those few seconds that we rolled down the window, my wife and I both instantly got sick. And it's an illness that I cannot describe. All of us have experienced nausea in your stomach. Imagine that from the tip of your head to the bottom of your toes. I have never in my life experienced anything like this. I got over it in about 6 hours. My wife took about 24. I just wanted to share that with you. That's what's coming. Okay, I would like to address some of the problems that will arise from if unconventional drilling is permitted in the newly zoned agriculture areas of Ligonier Township. Part of my concerns involve certain aspects of the drilling process that you and the public may be unaware of. And the other part involves the impact it will have on our township given its unique geology and topography. First of all, I want to let you know that I do have a degree in geology, so I know a little what I'm talking about. Tom Myers, Dr. Myers, is a hydrogeologist who published an article in Groundwater, the Journal of the National Groundwater Association. His study stated that frac chemicals can migrate toward drinking water supplies far more quickly than previously predicted. Natural faults and fractures exacerbated by fracking could allow chemicals to reach the surface in hundreds of years or as little as a few years. Rock layers are not impermeable. Fracking will dramatically speed up the movement of chemicals injected into the ground. Many man-made fractures can intersect with natural faults to allow contaminants to reach the surface in tens of years or way less. Additionally, the force of fracking doesn't stop immediately. Chemicals left underground are still being pushed away from the drill site and can take 5 or 6 years before the natural balance of pressure is reestablished underground. Indeed, a Duke University study in northeastern Pennsylvania, where it's heavily impacted by fracking, concluded that salty fluids are seeking upwards thousands of feet into drinking water supplies. The presence of this brine suggests that these areas could be at greater risk of contamination of shallow drinking water resources, particularly by fugitive gases from drilling, because of a pre-existing network of pathways that has enhanced hydraulic connectivity to deeper geological formations. Another hydrogeologist, Paul Rubin, who works for a firm called HydroQuest, he and other hydrogeologists are concerned not just about fractures and faults, but the potential for water contamination through drilling and well casing failures. Quote, "It is not if, but when it will happen, and it will happen," Rubin says. His studies have focused on documented cases of cement and steel casing problems and relatively short lifespans, hundreds of years of the casings, compared with the million-year lifespan of the aquifers that they are supposed to protect. Well casings will degrade, and even if that does not end up being a problem, the fracturing process itself will result in cracking of the cement sheath around the drill. Also, a lot of these wells are in seismically active areas where ground motion and shaking themselves will crack it. It's also true that no one knows exactly how many abandoned oil and gas wells litter Pennsylvania. The state's Department of Environmental Protection estimates the number close to 200,000. We also know that for decades, many of the wells have leaked methane into the air, soil, and water. The old wells are posing an increasing threat. More companies drill into the state's Marcellus shale, and more likely it becomes that the old wells will act as pathways for newly released gas to make its way into the earth to streams and even people's homes. I'd also like to comment and address the geology of the Ligonier Valley and the need, at the very minimum, for making Chestnut Ridge and Laurel Mountain complete conservation zones where no unconventional drilling is permitted. These ridges define the western and eastern borders of our township. They will naturally funnel any surface contamination into our valley where we live. This condition is obvious to anyone who is a resident here. This alone is enough to make us pause and consider the wisdom of permitting unconventional drilling in these areas. But let's consider another potentially greater problem, the geology. Many are not knowledgeable about the rocks below us. The Chestnut Ridge and Laurel Mountain are anticlines. The rock strata underneath them is not horizontal. Many of us have seen hills or places where streams have cut valleys into the land, and seen horizontal rock layers where the streams simply carve out valleys and you see these nice horizontal strata. But the rocks under Chestnut and Laurel Ridges are anticlines. That means that the rocks slope upward into a giant arch. And conversely, the Ligonier Valley is a syncline where the rocks slope downward. So imagine this. You have the anticline here and here on either side, and the syncline in the middle. Okay? Rainwater that falls on this, obviously surface water, is going to drain right down into the valley, into our streams, tributaries, everything we value. Well, what about the geology? The rocks are also doing this. So Chestnut and Laurel Ridge act like catchment areas for this water. And that means if you drill on them, any contamination that goes into the well water, into the aquifers, guess what? By gravity flow, it goes even faster than it would in horizontal rock layers. By gravity flow, this stuff is going to flow right down into the aquifers that we tap into. That what Mrs. Robitaille discussed, I believe it was 1,600 wells, private wells in this area. So that's a real concern. That's really something to think about and consider whether or not you're going to allow drilling in these areas. Again, hydrogeologist Paul Rubin said, it's not if contamination occurs, but when it will happen, and it will happen. And to quote Dr. Myers again, his conclusion said, until more data is collected on the way that hydraulic fracturing affects the hydrogeologic cycle, the whole process should not occur in sensitive or highly populated areas. I contend that we live in one of those sensitive areas. Therefore, in conclusion, I have to ask if you're really willing to take the risk of potential harm to the drinking water resources of the citizens of Ligonier Township by permitting a heavy industrial process of unconventional drilling for natural gas on Chestnut, Laurel Ridges, and in the whole valley itself. I think that those areas, along with the rest of the valley, deserve protection. Thank you.
Jan Shelton. Jan here.
Right here.
I'm going to have Stephanie Berna help me by doing a PowerPoint presentation up there, just because sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words. It's going to be a little hard to see, but we'll give it a go. I'm very concerned about air pollution in the valley, and air pollution occurs at every stage of gas operations, during drilling, truck transport of chemicals, wastewater, water, and equipment, diesel exhaust from machinery and from compressor stations, and evaporation from wastewater containment pits, as well as blow-off from relief valves on condensate tanks. The air pollutants include known carcinogens such as benzene, formaldehyde, toluene, and other volatile organic compounds referred to as VOCs. When these hydrocarbon vapors mix with nitrogen oxides from the diesel exhaust of diesel equipment, ground-level ozone is produced, and this ozone, combined with particulate matter, creates smog. Ground level ozone damages the respiratory tract and can trigger health problems, especially for children, the elderly, and people of all ages who have lung diseases such as asthma. It can trigger chest pain, shortness of breath, coughing, throat irritation, and can inflame and damage the lining of the lungs. Ground level ozone can continue to damage the lungs even when the symptoms have disappeared. And ground level ozone can travel great distances, up to 200 miles. What you're seeing in this picture is a view of an inversion in Salt Lake Valley, Utah. We get inversions in our valley as well. I didn't have a picture of it. But if you have an inversion here and fracking is going on with those pollutants in the air, that is a toxic soup. Even after fracking is completed and most of the equipment is removed, condensate tanks, such as those shown below, which appear to have no emissions to the naked eye, on the left, go back to the previous one, the split picture on the left shows a regular picture, on the right shows a picture taken with a FLIR camera, which is infrared, and shows the emissions from those relief valves. Condensate tanks are equipped with relief valves to bleed off excess pressure, which means that toxins and VOCs are vented into the air 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That is not smoke from equipment. That is just emissions that are not visible to the naked eye. That's taken with an infrared camera. 5-state study has found unsafe levels of airborne chemicals near oil and gas fields. This 5-state study was done in Arkansas, Colorado, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Wyoming. In October 2014, a research team at the University at Albany Institute for Health and the Environment identified 8 highly toxic chemicals in air samples near fracking and associated infrastructure sites across those 5 states. The most common airborne chemicals detected included 2 proven carcinogens, benzene and formaldehyde, 2 potent neurotoxins, hexane and hydrogen sulfide. In 29 of 76 samples, concentrations far exceeded the federal health and safety standards, sometimes by several orders of magnitude, and high levels of pollutants were detected at distances exceeding legal setback distances from wellheads to home. Highly elevated levels of formaldehyde, for example, were found up to a half mile from a wellhead, and in Arkansas, 7 air samples contained formaldehyde at levels up to 60 times the level known to raise the risk of cancer. So what chemicals are used in fracking? This is a very difficult question to answer because of the Halliburton loophole that you've heard mentioned before, because drilling companies are not required to disclose the full list of chemicals. This list is a short list of 12 chemicals compiled by the New York State American Academy of Pediatrics. These are 12 chemicals known to be used in fracking or found in the brine drawn out of the well, and even with this small list, the potential health impacts are frightening. They created a table documenting the health effects of these 12 chemicals. 10 of the 12 chemicals list inhalation as a route of exposure. Exposure by inhalation means that the listed health effects simply result from you breathing air that is contaminated with these products. 10 of the 12 list drinking contaminated water or ingestion as a route of exposure. I'm not going to read these tables to you, but I'm going to have her keep flipping through them while I tell you some of the very serious health concerns that are associated with these 12. The health effects listed include severe irritation of eyes, skin, and mucosal membranes, leukemia, cancers of the lung, skin, cancers of the digestive tract, liver, bladder, kidney, peripheral vascular disease, headaches, drowsiness, fatigue, unconsciousness, convulsions, nausea, vomiting, aplastic anemia, excessive bleeding, low birth weight, severe lung irritation, chronic bronchitis. Keep in mind, these are 12. There are many, many more. And the list goes on. Just keep flapping through the list till we get to the end. These are documented medical facts. And you can find this study yourself. Look online. Would you knowingly expose yourself or your family to these chemicals, knowing the health conditions that will result? Health impacts linked to oil and gas pollution in Pennsylvania and Texas. 2 stand out, a Yale University study in September 2014 documenting that the closer you are to natural gas wells, the more likely you are to report skin and upper respiratory problems. A Cornell University study analyzing the effects on Pennsylvania mothers and on newborn babies identified a 26 increase in APGAR scores under 8. Scores less than 8 predict an increase in the need for respiratory support for the infant. And in Texas, this is a quote, a Texas jury awarded a family $2.8 million because, according to the lawsuit, a fracking company operating on property nearby had created a private nuisance by producing harmful air pollution and exposing members of that family to harmful emissions of volatile organic compounds, toxic air pollutants, and diesel exhaust. The family's 11-year-old daughter became ill, and family members suffered a range of symptoms including nosebleeds, vision problems, nausea, rashes, blood pressure issues. Because drilling did not occur on their property, the family had initially been unaware that their symptoms were caused by activities around them. That's one family's health issues. Toxic air pollution will not remain confined to the fracking site and will affect surrounding property owners. Air quality will continue to deteriorate as the level of pollutants and ozone increase. Is this what we want for the Ligonier Valley? And in conclusion, I'd like to quote from the Concerned Health Professionals of New York Compendium of Scientific, Medical, and Media Findings demonstrating risks and harms of fracking from an update that was published in December 2014. Earlier scientific predictions and anecdotal evidence are now bolstered by empirical data confirming that the public health risks from unconventional gas and oil extraction are real. The range of adverse effects significant and the negative economic consequences considerable. Our examination of the peer-reviewed medical and public health literature uncovered no evidence that fracking can be practiced in a manner that does not threaten human health. Please protect the rights and health of the residents of Ligonier Township, and let's learn from the experiences of other states and other counties within our own state. Fracking is an industrial activity and should be confined to an industrial area. Hydraulic fracturing is not a compatible use in areas zoned agricultural or residential. Opening up the proposed amount of land to fracking will pose significant health risks to the residents of Ligonier Valley. Thank you.
Please.
I passed out a handout with a written material on this for the board review later on. The title says, Project the impact of unconventional gas extraction on Ligonier Township roadways and implications for local taxpayers. According to the website marcellashale.us, truck traffic per wellhead is anticipated 400 to 1,300 trips of trucks weighing 40 to 50 tons carrying water and residual waste, not including 80 to 200 trucks carrying sand, pipe, and drilling equipment, the drill rig, etc. Some of these vehicles may weigh well over 50 tons. Each well site may have 3 to 10 wellheads, meaning that truck traffic per site will save 3,500 trips, maybe as high as 15,000. Drilling companies have suggested that municipalities bond their roads prior to drilling to permit repaving once the drilling and fracking are completed. The suggested bond, and I presented this earlier, I've since come up with some other numbers, about $13,000 per well. I would submit that it would cost that much to regrade and finish my driveway. The figure of $13,000 to cover several miles of road repair, bridge repair, and road resurfacing is absurd. Furthermore, it's been demonstrated repeatedly that many of the drilling operators simply forfeit the bond, leaving the township or state to cover the road repair costs. Even when monies come from the drilling companies, the amount falls far short of the actual cost of repair. That's a footnote. This bond, which covers road repair, well plugging, and remediation when forfeited, also excuses the well operator from later land and water remediation, well plugging, and capping. I will not cover this subject right now because I want to focus just on the road damage repair. Number 3, please. A quote from Mr. Scott Christie, Deputy Secretary of PennDOT in 2010. The damage caused by this additional truck traffic rapidly deteriorates from minor surface damage to completely undermining the road surface. Next slide, please. Roadway base caused deterioration in several weaker bridge structures. He went on to note there are about 7,100 wells in the state, 2010 DEP data, with cost of road repair estimated about $13,000 to $25,000 per well. The fracking truck traffic to each well is equivalent to about 3.5 million cars on the road over that same time period. Next slide. If each site has 3 to 10 wellheads, with road repair costs estimated $13,000 to $25,000 per well, this means each site might cost Ligonier Township between $39,000 and $250,000 per fracking, according to Mr. Christie's estimate. If we take the average of ranges proposed by Mr. Christie, we arrive at a possible cost of $19,000 per well. If we then allow the site to have 5 wells, and this is typical, each fracking at $19,000 per well, fracked as a road repair cost, and each pad or site may cost $95,000 in road damages per fracking. Next slide. Each well can be fracked up to 18 times its lifespan, and using the above estimated $95,000 per well site at 5 wells per site, each fracking times 18 frackings, this could cost the township $1.7 million per site over the anticipated 30-year life of that well. No source was given by Mr. Christie, and there may be numbers, but I could not find them. Next slide, please. According to a study done by D.L. Rogers in 2013, it's estimated that Pennsylvania will need $3.5 billion for shale-related road repairs, an additional $8.7 billion for bridge and repair and construction, for a combined total of $12.2 billion. In my book, that's a lot of money. This for 7,200 active wells at the time of the study. The industry has targeted Pennsylvania as a sweet spot and plans to have in excess of 100,000 wells, in 2013. What do these numbers mean? Firstly, Rogers Road repair estimates of $12.2 billion. It was not specifically stated in the report, but I have to assume that this was over the 30-year life expectancy of the wells. Anything less than that, these figures would be way too high. So I based my calculations on a 30-year life expectancy of 7,200 wells. If we divide that cost of $12.2 billion by 7,200, we come up with a figure of $1.6 million per well site, which is close to Mr. Christie's numbers, except this is per well, not per site. And the site may have up to 10 or more wells. Small wonder the drill operator would skip town and leave you guys with a bond of $13,000. Should Ligonier Township in the end be home to just 10 well sites with 5 wells per site, we have 50 wells at a road repair cost of $1.694 million per well, totaling $84,700,000 over 30 years. Let's just stop here for a second. 50 wells could cost the township over $84 million in road repair costs. Next slide, number 8. 2010 census figures places Ligonier with about 2,914 households. Assuming they are all eligible to pay township taxes, each of these 2,914 households, of which I am just one, may anticipate a tax increase, taking that number dividing by the number of citizens, above and beyond the current tax by the amount of $29,066 over 30 years. Potential tax increase of $969 per year. I would submit that we're more likely, given the current zoning map and ordinances to be proposed by our supervisors, to be home to more than just 10 pads, but this gets into speculation. I'm not going to go there. However, we do have the Nelson site in the northwest corner of the township as instructive. And using the above estimate cited by Rogers at $1.69 million per well, and the Nelson site currently has 3 wells on it, over a 30-year period, that single site could cost $5 million. Or, if you will, an increase in township taxes of $169,000 per year, or each person would pay $58, which doesn't sound like too much, just increase your tax per year of $58, for a total of $1,743 over 30 years. But we get nothing in return for this but polluted air and water, and 10 such sites as the Nelson would cost the taxpayer $580 a year in additional taxes. Ligonier Township has about 102 miles of township-maintained paved roadways. If you use data from the Rogers study, roads degraded by drilling traffic have a 5 to 7 year life expectancy. If we allow just 25% of roads being impacted by this, we have to mill and resurface those roads 4 times over 30 years. We're going to pay heavily. Number 12, please. Specific road repairs. Next slide after that. Yeah, no, back up one. There. Specific road repair costs per mile were quite varied, and I chose a generic model from capitalfacts.com, whose estimate is $416,000 for milling and resurfacing per mile. Pennsylvania may be less, but I could not find exact figures for our state. But if you take $416,000 times 25 miles times 4 resurfacing projects over 30 years, this comes to $41,600,000. A lot of money again. This would cost an average household tax unit an additional $475 per year, for a total of $14,275 over 30 years. And this does not address the cost of bridge repair, replacement of box drains, culverts, catch basins, etc. and it only covers road damage, does not begin to address the cost of replacing or remediating lost wells, capping and plugging orphan wells, stream cleanup, and remediation. I'm going to skip over some stuff that Mr. Christie put in here, but I'm going to jump on to taxable number 15. Yeah, thank you. I want to be very clear. None of these estimates are quite, or all these estimates are quite varied, and none of the figures exactly states our potential tax risk over the next 30 years. We simply don't know. But they are projected estimates, and the projections were made by people with experience in highway construction, maintenance, and it's very clear that taxpayers will have to pay for these anticipated damages, and the payments are likely to be significant. As a final note from the highway departments, the road repair costs already well exceed what the drilling industry is paying in return. Pennsylvania, as of right now, requires a driller post a bond ranging from $4,000 to $10,000 per well. This was a House bill, and it's also footnoted in my notes. This will not come close to covering even the most conservative projected costs. There's a graphic on the next slide. You can't see that because it's just too small for what we have here. But the bottom rectangle is about Pennsylvania. Impact fee revenue to date is $204 million. Funds to maintain the roads that we need is $3.5 billion. There's a slight mismatch there, people. It means that the frackers have paid 5.8% of the damages they cost. We're holding the bag for the rest of it. Keep that in mind.